Welcome to this week's edition of Good Books Radio. Audiobooks.com is the chief underwriter for Good Books Radio, which is produced by UTRGV Media Services for Rio Grande Valley Public Radio. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Cook.
Welcome once again to another edition of Good Books Radio. I'm your host this week, Dr. John Cook, and with me today is Dr. Terry Wahls, a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine in Iowa City. She conducts clinical research studying the use of diet and lifestyle interventions in autoimmune and other chronic disease states. Her current clinical trial, featuring the Wahls Paleo Diet, received the support of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, and she has made it her mission to spread the word about the Wahls Protocol through her TED Talks, her website, terrywahls.com, and the Wahls Foundation and the Wahls Protocol seminars. Dr. Wahls lives in Iowa City with her wife. Dr. Wahls, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me.
This is an interesting book, and I guess I thought of it as the sequel to the original book, the Wahls Protocol. This is the cooking book, the Wahls Protocol
Yes.
Cooking for Life, yes? And
Yes, absolutely.
it's a great read, and a couple of things that I would like folks to know. And the first, of course, is that you have been a sufferer of MS symptoms of multiple sclerosis yourself.
Yeah, I had 7 years of steady decline. I spent 4 years in a tilt recline wheelchair, getting steadily worse each year, despite seeing the best people at the Cleveland Clinic and the University of Iowa.
Mm-hmm. And you experimented on yourself with supplements and nutritionally dense foods and electrical stimulation, and basically you got a crash course in this kind of medicine that you're practicing.
Well, you know, I spent 4 years experimenting on myself, and eventually I was able to create this very intensive program that got me in 12 months' time from being unable to sit up to being able to do a 20-mile bike ride with my family.
And that's just fantastic. That's a miracle as far as I'm concerned.
Me too. Yeah, it's a miracle to my family too.
Yeah. You know, a lot of talk is about staying in ketosis, and I want people to understand that what ketosis is basically just a fancy way of saying that your cells are burning fat energy instead of sugar energy, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And what's the benefit of that in terms of this autoimmune issue?
Well, we've learned that ketosis is a very good way of treating refractory seizures. It's being studied for treating brain cancer, all cancers, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I've studied it for MS. And so this is just another one of those very useful tools for using a dietary approach to treating a chronic health problem.
Mm-hmm. So there's 3 levels of this diet, and I'm experimenting with level 1 myself right now. There are certain things.
That's a great place to start.
Yeah, the other is going to be more challenging for me for a variety of reasons. But let's talk first about the foods you eliminate, and then talk about what you need to consume. Gluten is a big deal, and many of our books on nutrition and wellness mention eliminating gluten, especially anything made with wheat or wheat flour. But there are other things, of course, that contain gluten, like barley and rye.
So we take gluten out, we take dairy out because it's structurally similar to gluten. Mm-hmm. And if you have the DQ2, DQ8 allele, you're more likely to develop this abnormal immune response to those foods. And if that happens, you rev up all of your inflammation, and you're at marked increased risk for developing an autoimmune diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And so in my lifestyle clinic, when we'd see people with autoimmune or medical or neurological problems, we'd have them all remove gluten and dairy from their diet for 100 days to see what impact that would have.
Mm-hmm. And there are subs for dairy products. You're big in your recipes on coconut milk, but also other nut milks like unsweetened almond milk and so on.
Yes, yeah.
Eggs and egg-containing products. This one is hard for me, too, because I love eggs so much. What's the...
Yeah, you know, I love eggs, too, but eggs are the third most common unrecognized food sensitivity problem, and it's the protein in the egg white. You might tolerate the yolk, but the egg white is a problem. Mm-hmm. And I'm really very, very sensitive to eggs, and that'll trigger my flare of pain.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Limit other non-gluten flours. Part of my program before was to use gluten-free pasta and gluten-free bread, and that really doesn't help, right?
You know, they're really, really tasty, and that may be helpful, but I limit that to no more than 1 serving a day. Mm-hmm. So 1 half cup of rice, a half cup of pasta, a small piece of gluten-free bread, one serving a day. That's because those gluten-free grains still have too much sugar, too much white flour. They still feed the wrong bacteria in the bowels. They still turn on the wrong genes in terms of gene expression. I'd much rather people eat vegetables.
The bowel issue I want to mention, because I know that part of what the challenge is having the right kind of bacteria, and a lot of these things we're eliminating feed the wrong kind of bacteria, right?
Exactly. And that's why I stress taking out the sugar, the white flour. I'm not keen on gluten-free products, but I'm very keen on greens and cabbages and the cabbage family vegetables, onion family vegetables, and deeply pigmented vegetables.
And I do want to talk about what to include, but I don't want to leave off another elimination, and that is processed sugar in all forms of sweeteners like honey and maple syrup and sorghum. And even artificial sweeteners. Now, I've been through a battle with this because I'm pre-diabetic, and I read what was wrong with saccharin, and I read what was wrong with aspartame, and I went to Splenda for a while, but then I found out that I was getting the same kind of reaction with Splenda as you do with sugar, and so now I'm on stevia, but you even want to eliminate stevia if you can, right?
Yeah. I'd much rather, if we think of fruit as our dessert, and that we wean ourselves away from that sweet flavoring, because all of the compounds that are stimulating that are, when they're artificial or excitotoxins, they all shift the wrong gut bacteria in our bowels. If you want to grow stevia the plant and use some stevia leaves in your iced tea, that's fine, but I wouldn't use the processed stevia. I think we're better off learning to forego the sugars, the artificial sugars.
And some of your Wahls Warriors, in statements they've made, and it takes a couple of weeks to get used to it, but after a while you adjust, right?
Yes, you absolutely do adjust.
Now, the things we need to do on the Wahls diet, we talked about what to eliminate. First of all, and I didn't know that I could do this, but 9 cups of fruits and vegetables. That's 3 cups of raw or cooked leafy greens, and preferably the dark kind. And then colored vegetables and some fruits, beets, carrots, squash, and then sulfur-rich vegetables like broccoli, cabbage, mushrooms, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, turnips, radishes, garlic, and onions, 2 of my favorites. And
excellent.
But those that feels like a lot. When you say 9 cups, it feels like a lot.
Well, it feels like a lot, but most men and tall women, I'm 6 foot tall, when we take away the sugar in the processed foods, usually we can consume the 9 cups pretty easily. There is no need to overeat and stuff yourself, but by adding the 9 cups goal and stressing this is what I want you to eat, I crowd out the bad food. Because I don't want people to be hungry. Basically, I want you to eat vegetables and meat according to your appetite. It should be mostly vegetables and some meat.
Very good. And in the meat category, you mentioned per week about 16 ounces of omega-3 rich fish and a little bit of fish and poultry.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Grass-fed meats, if you can afford that, are also very good as well. And if people are hunters and fishermen, I encourage hunting and fishing and foraging for wild foods.
Well, let's talk about the good oils, because it's important that they be the right oils. I mean, we want to burn fats, but we want to burn the right fats. So
if you're going to cook with fat, I'd rather it be solid at room temperature and a saturated fat. And those fats tolerate the heat very well. So bacon fat, lard, duck fat, chicken fat, coconut oil. If you take a oil and you heat it, you'll damage the oil. It's going to be oxidized. You'd be more likely to have trans fats there that are very inflammatory. So instead, I'd rather you use the oils to make sauces and that you're going to use cold in salad dressings. Olive oil has many healing properties to it. Flax oil, hemp oil, also many healing properties. But I want you to use them cold in your salad dressings.
Very good. Okay, so level 2, one of the major changes is an emphasis on organ meats and seaweed and spirulina and so forth. What does that add to the mix to go to level 2?
The organ meat has a lot of coenzyme Q. It's got great sources of B vitamins, of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin K. And our ancestors would have known that these, particularly liver, is some of the most nutrient-dense, nutritious food for us. And so having liver a couple times a week, liver and onions, very good for you. And they can be quite delicious. My kids really like liver and onions. You just have to learn how to cook them properly.
Mm-hmm. And the seaweed, algae foods, is that just more omega-3?
So seaweed is a great source of minerals, iodine, selenium, and other trace minerals. Minerals are vital cofactors for all of our enzymatic steps. And so to that end, I add the seaweed flakes and use them like a spice in our dishes. Mm-hmm. And when I started using them, my family raved at the deliciousness of these soups, stews, broths, and casseroles, probably because we're getting more of these trace minerals in our diet. Mm-hmm. The algae is very helpful, and the chlorophyll is a great nutrition for us. The algae also helps us process and eliminate toxins more effectively. Mm-hmm. So that's something I'd consider a superfood as well.
Phytonutrients in those dark green foods is really special part of being healthy. But now when we go to level 3, one of the things I noticed that you're reducing your fruit significantly to one of the least sweet fruits, and that's berries.
Yeah.
And reduce the cooked starchy vegetables like squash, one of my favorites too, and
and reduce the meat, mm-hmm. And we increase the fat, mm-hmm. and that's so that you're burning more fat in your cells. It's very good for refractory seizures. It's good for Alzheimer's. It is good for brain cancer. It is good for all cancers. And this is where I take people if they've not gotten the results they were hoping for from the first 2 levels.
Mm-hmm. The one of the things you mentioned that's needed a lot, whether you're dealing with the non-grain granolas or some of the other things you make, is a high-speed blender. And you're like the third author who's mentioned the Vitamix as a good brand of blender to get all the nutrition without, like a juicer gets rid of the fiber, and that's a bad thing.
Yeah. You know, I thought the Vitamix was really expensive, and I was going to waste my money on that, so I waited for my blender to die. So it took me a year and a half to find my diet, and then I got the Vitamix, and I so enjoyed it. It was so helpful. I found myself wondering, like, why on earth did I wait so long?
Very good.
Because it was, such a useful kitchen tool.
Mm-hmm. One of the staples that you use in a variety of recipes is bone broth. Tell me why that's a good thing.
Well, bone broth has a lot of gelatin and collagen in it, which will help heal the leaky gut, which is often a problem for people with a chronic health issue. It provides collagen, which is a substrate for all the protein structures in our body. It's a very potent youthening strategy. It helps heal your skin. It helps reverse wrinkling. It also balances against the methionine amino acids in muscle meat. So it does some very good things for us hormonally. Mm-hmm. It is really another, what I'd call a superfood in terms of its healing potential.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about fermented cabbage, because I know that's one of those gut health things. Fermented cabbage will have several hundred different lactobacillus species in it as well. Our ancestors would have had that routinely throughout the winter. It is a great way to introduce more diversity into your gut microbiome. Again, a very nourishing, very healing food. Mm-hmm. We had a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago who had a diet for brain health, and they mentioned the same thing you did about eliminating dairy, and that is one of the things that's very difficult for me because I really do like cheese and cottage cheese a lot. So you have some substitutes.
I'll explain why you do that. When your body metabolizes the protein in dairy called casein, mm-hmm. it makes a protein that is very similar to endorphins. So it is actually a very addicting compound. So that's part of why it is so difficult for us to give up dairy and cheese. It's because literally we are addicted to it.
Mm-hmm. And you have a Parmesan recipe using yeast and walnuts and sea salt to make a imitation Parmesan. How does that compare?
Yeah, it's really quite delicious.
Is it? Yeah?
Yeah, it's great. My kids like that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Can you put it on spaghetti?
Yeah, well, we put it on our spaghetti squash.
Mm-hmm.
We make zucchini noodles that we use for some of our red sauces and other sauces. So there are many strategies to work your way around giving up the gluten.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to suffer. We have delicious food.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about nightshade a little bit, because nightshades are a family of plants that we have to be careful about.
So nightshades are the potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. And people with rheumatoid arthritis in particular do not tolerate the nightshades. And some people use what's called the autoimmune protocol, which eliminates nightshades from the beginning. And that is one strategy. But the problem with that is it makes it harder for people to transition from the standard American diet if you put them straight on an elimination diet. What we found is if we put them on our level 1 diet, the vast majority of folks have tremendous reduction in their symptoms, less pain, more energy, more mental clarity, and they're doing really well. And that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks, maybe 10%, are going to have to go all the way to the elimination diet. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority would do very fine with level 1 or level 2.
Very good. Okay, so you mentioned spaghetti squash earlier, and you have a recipe that basically cooks the squash first and then either in a slow cooker or low heat, and then you... Yeah?
Right, you can put it in the slow cooker or you can put it in the oven and fluff that up and put the sauce that you'd like to put over that. Spaghetti sauce might be a red sauce, or it might be a curried sauce, or a peanut sauce if you're a Thai person. So it depends on the culinary tradition that you'd like to use.
Very good. And while we're substituting starchy foods, you have a cauliflower broccoli rice, too. Yes.
As a matter of fact, we had that last night. It's just delicious. We had that with some filet mignon, so it was a lovely supper.
That's wonderful. Okay, smoothies. Let's talk a little bit about smoothies, because you have a great series of recipes here on those.
Yeah, the way I structure the smoothies is at level 1, let you have more fruit in the smoothie, and then as you progress, when you get to the ketogenic version, then it's coconut milk and vegetables, no fruit. But still, because of the coconut milk, that mellows out the greens, so it's still really quite delicious. It's not bitter at all.
Mm-hmm. And you have a strawberry or raspberry carrot smoothie, and you include the Brazil nut, which seems to be kind of a magical nut in terms of nutrition.
Yeah, the Brazil nuts have some selenium in them, and many of us are short on our selenium, and if you're short on selenium, that can be a real strain on your thyroid. So I like to have people have a couple of Brazil nuts every day to make sure they have sufficient selenium stores.
Okay. Beyond water, green juices, teas, and other beverages is a chapter about how to change from what we're used to, which is juice that we have been told for years was good for us, and it's full of sugar.
So I try to have people blend their juice in the Vitamix, so it keeps all of the fiber and nutrition. And then if you blend some of that juice in with a mineral water or a spritzer, that really it can be very fun. It makes sort of a fun pre-dinner cocktail-like drink if you're having a party and celebrations. And we have a variety of very healing teas to help people improve their detox pathways as well.
Mm-hmm. I was noticing one, it's a turmeric and pepper cream tea, and of course I take turmeric supplements. I take curcumin because I think it's so good for brain health and circulation.
It is terrifically good for us. But this is also a lovely healing beverage to add turmeric and coconut milk. And you can add that to your tea, or you can have it with bone broth. And it's really a delicious, delicious way to get some more turmeric into your diet.
If we turn our attention to granola, grain-free granola, you have some wonderful ideas there with regard to nuts and chia or flaxseed being the basis for making good granola.
Yes.
It's
and there are dried coconut flakes that can also be a very tasty part of a granola approach. So there are ways of making a granola-like breakfast that many people really enjoy having on hand.
Mm-hmm. And then in cooler weather, you prefer porridge, and the porridge, of course, can't be grain either.
Correct. So there's a flaxseed or a hemp seed porridge that really is makes for a lovely morning start. Mm-hmm. Particularly when you make it with some full-fat coconut milk. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my gosh, that is so delicious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I as level 1, I'm still allowed a little quinoa or brown rice if I want, but on the other levels, it's just like getting rid of the grain is the basic intention, I guess.
And that's also part of why I was very intentional about having a stepwise approach, because if you have great healing response on level 1, you could just stay at level 1.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that's the case for me. But let's talk about main course salads and wraps a little bit, because I really like the idea of wraps, because I would miss not having something that resembles a sandwich or a taco.
Well, and this, kale leaves, the curly kale leaf makes a very nice pocket like a green taco. You could use a large romaine lettuce leaf, or you could use a large Swiss chard leaf, or something that's a little more durable, a large collard leaf, to put your sliced deli meats or your liver pate and guacamole to make a lovely wrap, or a tuna salad, a chicken salad sandwich, a salmon salad sandwich. And, again, that's something that my family really, really likes a great deal. Mm-hmm. The salmon salad collard wrap has been one of their favorite meals.
Fantastic. And I saw some salad recipes that I really like, because you do allow and actually encourage them to add certain meats. There's a smoked oyster salad recipe that looks really good, and you also have some great dressing ideas to keep it on track.
Yes. And making your own salad dressing is so easy, and you'll discover that it tastes so much better than what's commercially available.
Mm-hmm. And of course, if you're starting with extra virgin olive oil, you're better off than some of the bases that we have. I really like blue cheese, but I make pesto, and I find that that's every bit as delightful on salad.
Like, oh my gosh, yes. And then growing, your own fresh herbs. If you have a little bit of sunshine, that's a huge treat as well.
You mentioned a couple of recipes that involve bacon. There's a bacon salad and there's a bacon back dish in here. And I'm wondering about that, because, we've been warned by so many others about nitrates, processed.
Yeah, so I do discuss that in the book, that I want you to find bacon that is nitrate-free. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, the bacon actually can be very helpful for you. In fact, the cell membrane, that is the wrapper around your cells, and the myelin, which is the insulation on the wiring between your brain cells, depends on saturated fat and cholesterol. Mm-hmm. So it's important that we have a sufficient amount of saturated fat and cholesterol in our diet so we can make these important structures.
Mm-hmm. I want to at least touch on soups and skillets, because there's some great ideas in there that I've already taken up myself. So making soup from scratch, and of course that you can use your bone marrow base as part of that in some cases. Yes.
Yeah, and I give some directions how you could do it on the stove, or you could do it in your crock pot. And this is something actually I love doing on the weekend, making a big kettle of soups and stews, and then I can some of it, put it in my jars, warm, seal it up, and so I have some soups in on hand for during the week. Mm-hmm. These are wonderful healing meals.
Mm-hmm. Delightful recipe. As I'm reading through them, I'm thinking, I've got to make that one too. But the basic skillet template, let's talk about that, and we certainly want to mention garlic in there.
Oh, yeah. So this template is a wonderful meal because you cook everything in the same skillet, and I can generally have it done in 20 to 30 minutes. So from the time that I start to the time that I'm sitting down and eating with my family is generally in 20 to 30 minutes. And I think that's important because so many of us are pressed for time, so we make it affordable in terms of time, in terms of convenience and ease. And routinely, these are the meals that I have day in and day out, is some variation of the skillet meal, plus a salad on the side.
And you mentioned that it's called a skillet meal, but you prefer a taller pot because to put in all those greens you need to put in, it really helps to have a Dutch oven.
Right, they don't have things spilling out.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time, and I want you to know that this has inspired me to work on my diet a lot, and there's a lot of good tips in here. We haven't even touched on, your ideas for how to make it through the holidays and snacks and so on. In addition to the Vitamix, a dehydrator apparently is a good idea, especially when you're looking at snacks like jerky and vegetable chips.
Correct. Kale chips were one of my children's favorite snacks, and their friends as well. They realize that kale could be quite delicious as a kale chip.
I know that you're about to move on to your next interview because this very popular book is being talked about on radio stations across the country. But I want to offer you my morning breakfast skillet recipe today. So I put about 2 ounces of ground sausage in little balls with a lot of onion and 2 cloves of garlic. And I added sliced red cabbage and sliced kale leaves and some broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots to the mix. And I put in a couple of tablespoons of coconut oil. And then I cooked it till it was soft with salt, ground pepper, and green curry. And it was absolutely delightful.
That's a wonderful breakfast. It sounds good.
It was
sounds delicious.
Thank you so much for this contribution. I know that there's several testimonials of folks whose family or themselves didn't know where to turn because of their autoimmune disorder, and they found that diet is the key. And it's nice that you're doing this pioneering work, and it's a valuable contribution.
Thank you very much.
We've been talking with Dr. Terry Wahls. The book is The Wahls Protocol Cooking for Life, and it's now available. I'm your host, Dr. John Cook. I remind our listeners, if you don't catch our program at its regularly scheduled time, you can also find us on YouTube at Good Books Radio Strong and Cook. I'm your host, Dr. John Cook. Thanks for listening.